Here.
Dan Stoddard.
Here.
Bobby Green. Juanesio Herrera. Dennis Trujillo.
Present.
Okay, so we have a quorum. Did everyone get a copy of the agenda?
Yes.
Any changes to the agenda? Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Everyone get a copy of the May 23rd, 2017 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, any changes or corrections?
No. No.
Take a motion to approve the May 23rd, 2017 minutes as submitted.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, public hearings. Actually, this is a legislative hearing, right?
Correct.
So do we need anybody to sworn in?
No.
Okay, so we don't need to be sworn in. So there's only one item on this, and that's the comprehensive zoning ordinance revision, section 10D.13, oil and gas exploration and production. So we'll talk a little bit about how we're going to handle this issue, because we will have multiple meetings on this. What I've asked the staff to do, well, so basically it's going to be divided, the entire process will be divided into two major parts. The first part, which starts tonight, is intended to make sure that we understand how oil and gas exploration is handled right now, and then we will start going through literally word by word the proposed ordinance. We will not, as this part of the hearing, we will not take any comments about whether you like or dislike the ordinance. That's the second part that will happen maybe 2 or 3 meetings from now, after we've gone through the entire text, answered all the questions from the commission, and answered as many questions as we possibly can from the public. Once we feel that we've done as much as we can to educate ourselves and you about what is actually in the ordinance and how it will be handled, then all the future meetings will be devoted to discussions of whether it's a good thing or not, whether it should be amended, whether it should be thrown out or whatever. But tonight, particularly in this particular item 6, I'm only going to take questions that essentially say, tell me more about something that you just said, or I didn't understand what you just said, or how does what you just said actually work? I'm not going to allow testimony that says this is completely wrong, you need to do something entirely different. We'll do that a couple of meetings from now. Now, there's also a period called public comment, item number 12. At that point, you can say anything you want. You can tear down the ordinance, tell us anything you want, okay? But not in this section, where our intent is to make sure that people understand what we have in place right now, and then with us go through the proposed ordinance and understand exactly what the intent is, and make sure that everybody's questions are answered. Okay? Everybody clear on that? Okay. So my understanding is that Michael's going to start and talk to us about the current, what the current ordinance, not modified, but what we have right now, how that, how we deal with oil and gas development.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, tonight is just an introduction to this process. It's an introduction of the draft ordinance. And a lot of what we're going to discuss this evening has to do with procedural issues. If we don't get the procedure down, as the chairman just said, we're going to spin our wheels. We're going to waste a lot of time. I can tell you the directions given to me by the chairman of the county commission is that he wants an ordinance done by the end of the year. So we've got a lot of work to do to get there. The way we've set it up, and I cleared this with the chairman, in fact it was his recommendation that we have 2 meetings a month. The first meeting of the month, it'll be on the second We're on a Thursday only because Makita had to be out of town and couldn't be here for his father's birthday. So, but typically what we'll do is the second Tuesday of the month, we'll have nothing but oil and gas. The fourth Tuesday of the month will be a regular meeting. If we have any cases, like we do have 2 cases, and one is probably going to take quite a long period of time, we'll go ahead and list oil and gas on there, but if there's no time, we won't do it at the regular meetings. If we don't have any cases, of course, we'll get lucky and we got a whole second meeting to deal with oil and gas. So that's how we'll do it. Regular meetings are regular meetings, and then the special meetings are just totally oil and gas. I want to go over a couple of things because we get a lot of questions, but the direction that has been given to us was a reaffirmation given. It's in your amended staff report that I handed out on page 3 at their May 26th work session. It was an economic development strategy work session. The direction given to us was a reaffirmation of the previous county commission's directives, which was to clarify the zoning ordinance. Right now, the zoning ordinance is not very clear on how to deal with oil and gas. We will go through that and explain special use. To get an agreement with New Mexico Tech to give us assistance in that process. Dr. Fine is here. He's our representative from New Mexico Tech, is a Sandoval County resident, and has just been a great deal of help through this process. And then, of course, the third action that the previous commission gave was that they would not support a moratorium for oil and gas within the county. We did, let me just explain to you that a little history about the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that this is not something that's out of the ordinary, something that's different. This has actually happened many times before. Billboards and the billboard industry. We went through that. There was a large outcry that we should do something about billboards within the county. I'm sure the chairman remembers that was quite contentious. We did have quite a number of people who wanted us to simply outlaw billboards or write requirements that were so stringent that you couldn't do a billboard if you wanted to. The same thing with telecommunications, and I'll just pick a small part of that because that was what drove that ordinance, was cell towers. The county dealt with the cell tower ordinance. Again, there was quite a number of people who wanted us to outlaw cell towers or write stringent requirements that basically outlawed the cell towers. And then, of course, there was sand and gravel. Same thing. And so we've done this before. And here we are with oil and gas, and we'll go through the same process. The reason why I say that there were people who wanted us to outlaw is because I do need to speak to you about that. The U.S. Supreme Court and the New Mexico Supreme Court has held that if you're dealing with a legal business in land use, you cannot prohibit it. It's a legal business. You have to make reasonable accommodations for that business. You can't write, well, first of all, you cannot prohibit it. Moore County tried that, and we all know that Moore County was struck down on that. But you also cannot write ordinances that are so restrictive that it basically prohibits the use. So we need to be careful about that. We also have a history with jurisdictional issues. In the case of subdivisions, this list is on your supplemental staff information. When we were dealing with subdivision, there was quite an outcry for the county to get into the geohydrology business. They wanted us to basically take over the responsibilities of the state engineer and do it ourselves. At that time, the previous county commission made the decision that no, they're the state agency responsible for that activity. We will follow their guidelines and we will let them do that job. and then now to special use. Currently, oil and gas is governed by the special use section of the zoning ordinance. And it has the requirements, the chairman handed you the first portion of the special use district. You can see as you look at that it really doesn't say much. This is a holdover from the old ordinance, and there was not a lot of guidance given. Within that special use, it just says oil and gas activities. But it doesn't give us any guidelines on what to do or how to deal with a special use application. When Sand Ridge came in, for example, we didn't have a list of requirements to hand to them to say, you need to do these things, and then we can process you and we can bring you to this body for consideration. There was none of that. So just stuff was just going all over the place. We explained that to the previous county commission. We've explained that to this current county commission. And that staff believes we do need a set of clear guidelines on how to deal with this particular activity. It is unique. It presents land use impacts that need to be mitigated. Because I've heard the comment before that we don't need an ordinance. We don't need to do anything. Let's just leave it the way it is. I explained to the county commission at their economic development meaning that actually the way we are right now, of all the producing counties, we are the hardest county in the state. A special use rezoning requires first the applicant to come to the county staff, present an application that we review and comment on, and then it comes to the county planning and zoning commission for action, a recommendation to the county commission, and then goes to the county commission for action. So that's 3 separate steps that you have to make. Of all the counties, we are the hardest right now. We believe and we are proposing to bring Sandoval County more in line with the rest of the producing counties. We have an administrative section that Makita will go over, and then we have a conditional use provision for down here in the urban area. We have divided the county into 2 areas. It's on the big map, and we handed you little maps to look at. Basically, everything in red is the urban area. That's mostly all of our communities down in this portion of the county. These are the high-density populated areas. The areas in yellow are sparsely populated areas of the county. So we've done that. That's legally allowable under the law, that we can use criteria such as population density. In cell towers, for example, I'll flip that with our telecommunications, but in cell towers, we divided the county into separate districts. And we did that because of topography. The height of towers depends on the topography that you're working with. So we have a lot of mountainous areas, it's a lot different. And that was appropriate to do. The lack of guidance we've tried to explain to people does not provide for stability in terms of what the industry can expect, what the citizenry can expect, and we believe that that guidance is important. The draft ordinance that you have in front of you, we have been working with OCD now for over a year. We've had 3 separate meetings with them to discuss jurisdictional matters, purely jurisdictional matters. Are we stepping on their toe? Is this something that you regulate? Is this something you don't regulate? And I believe what you have in front of you is a pure land use ordinance. And that's what we do here. We do land use. We don't do engineering. We don't do air quality. We don't do drilling. We don't do any of that. We do land use. This is something that's not covered by the state. It's something that's not covered by the federal government. It's left to local government to do. And so that's what you have. If you have any questions on that, I'm glad to answer that. Otherwise, I'll let Makita introduce the ordinance and we can get going.
Yeah, I have some questions. First, just maybe a little explanation of the way you've identified the various categories. So yellow is permissive. This is after the ordinance is passed, or?
It should be really called administrative. It's an administrative permitting process.
Okay.
It mirrors OCD's permitting process, so an applicant can go hand in hand and work with both OCD and the county at the same time to streamline that process. They run about 10 days, and we run a special use, special events permitting process right now that runs about 10 days also. We think we can run this process the same way because it involves going to Public Works to talk about roads, going to the fire department to talk about emergency services, and then the rest of the stuff staff can do.
So the map though shows the current way or the way that the county will be divided if the ordinance as drafted is passed.
It represents the way the ordinance is drafted. However, we should probably change that map to administrative.
So tell me more about what exempt means.
Those are all the areas of the county where we have no jurisdiction. They're either tribal or federal or state.
So the yellow is basically privately owned land in very low density areas.
Correct.
Okay. And the red is areas that if oil and gas development was to occur, a conditional use would be required.
Correct.
Okay. And exempt is outside the county's control. What we do has no impact there.
Correct, and that is where all of the oil wells are right now.
Okay. Any idea what the percentage of yellow and red is versus blue?
We can calculate that for you and give it to you.
It's pretty small.
It's very small.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
have a question.
Please.
Mike, is it possible to put in locations of injection wells in our county also? If there are any? I know there's one in somewhere in the San Ysidro area.
Are you talking about licensed injection wells? by the
Licensed or
state?
not, I guess. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And if we can identify them, I would be curious as to where they are.
We can try.
Okay, that would be good. Thank you.
Just for the public, because I want to make sure that people understand. So OCD is the Office of, let's see, what exactly does it stand for?
Oil conservation.
Oil Conservation Division of the, well, Taxation and Revenue Department. But it is,
Energy minerals.
right, oh, okay. And so it is the agency that you're going to be hearing a lot about because it has many roles in terms of approving and inspecting and supervising oil and gas development in the county. And an injection well is a well where water that comes out of a well is put back into the ground. That's,
Amazing.
okay.
Sure.
Please do.
Michael, I guess my question is, if somebody would come to the county, would you think that they've already gone to OCD prior to get the, OCD is the permitting agency for even exploration.
Right.
So basically, you see them going to OCD and then coming to the county to say, this is where we're planning some exploration or we're planning on actual drilling. But they would probably, is there an application process that we check off, or they will come with an application from OCD?
Depending on how, depending on adoption of the ordinance.
Okay.
We've already talked to OCD about parallel notification to applicants. Currently, there's not one single well in the county on private land that we could find. And we've talked to OCD about a parallel process where they notify an applicant when they come into OCD that they have to also come to Sandoval County for an application process also. That's how the building industry, shoot, now I'm having a blank. CID. That's, they do that. So if somebody goes down to CID to get a permit to build a home in Sandoval County, they send them up to us.
And is there anything that's separate for geothermal?
Geothermal would not come under this.
Okay, so it's totally separate.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions, commissioners? Okay, so let's look at the other map for a minute. The one that shows where the wells are located. Are any of those wells on private land?
Not that we can define, no.
So
GIS is looking at that.
So as far as we know, every well in the county, and there's lots of them, are located in the areas that would not be covered by this ordinance. All the current wells are in an area that would not be covered by this ordinance.
It would be state, federal, or tribal.
Okay. And who regulates the development in the blue areas?
It depends which agency. A lot of them are BLM
Okay.
or tribal.
So I want to ask a few questions, more detailed questions about the special use district. So at the beginning, there's an intent statement, and there are 4 conditions that have to be met before we can award a special use. And I don't expect you to respond today, but I'd be curious to know. So one of them is to assure compatibility of property uses shall be maintained in the general area of where the special use is proposed. To preserve the integrity and character of the area in which the special use district will be located, and the utility and value of property in the special use district and in adjacent districts. To assure that the special use district will not become detrimental to public health, safety, or general welfare of the county, and to assure that the special use district will not conflict with Sandoval County Comprehensive Plan or other applicable land use plans adopted by the county. So one of the questions that I'm going to ask eventually is, does the change that we're proposing in the draft ordinance ensure that these same standards that we would have applied right now will also be met in the future? That is, if we adopt the ordinance, will we get the same effect as we would have by applying these 4 standards?
You need to look at that language in the context of which it's written. Those are all protective words for the county, to give the county an out in terms of legal battles with an applicant that comes into the county. If you look at the uses that are in special use, they're all tough land uses. They're all things people don't want around them. It's general language to help the legal team protect the county from lawsuits in case the county were to deny something. We believe that that draft that we have given you meet all of these.
So, my understanding is that there's at least some people that would prefer that there be no language about oil and gas development in planning and zoning ordinance. But explain the last part of the special use, which says other uses not included herein. So for those of you that don't have a copy of this, after what I just read, there are 13 different specific uses and language about whether they can be permitted. So, for example, a power plant is a special use, an adult bookstore is a special use, a massage parlor is a special use, a shopping center is a special use. So these are all listed, and there's criteria. But then there's this catch-all at the end that says, other uses not included herein, which means in the whole ordinance, not just in this list. So why is there that, and is that essential to an effective planning and zoning ordinance?
The code of land uses within the United States is about that thick. There's that many different land uses. You can go through our zoning ordinance and you can probably pick out 100. So we don't list everything. This ordinance, as you know, Mr. Chairman, has grown over time. Certain uses have been added to build up the special use section. There's just a lot of land uses out there that the county has determined if we haven't listed it, it's not permissive or conditional in our subsections or our RRA or our rural commercial or something like that. It's all plowed into special use.
So if the choice would be to not have any language in the ordinance about oil and gas development,
It would still be special use.
okay,
Unless, what you would have to do, I mean, this planning commission has several ways you could go, of course. After all of these hearings and listening and going through this draft, you could determine that your recommendation to the county commission is leave the ordinance the way it is. Your determination could be make it permissive, like the other counties that you have listed in your staff report. And you'll see there's a large number of counties where it's permissive. You go get your OCD license, you go out and you drill. Or you adopt an ordinance dealing with the situation.
so say a little bit more about what permissive means.
Permissive means you can do it. In RRA, you can build a house. That's permissive. You can have a guest house. You can do a park. You can do what I have the list here. But
Yeah.
it just means you don't have to come to the staff to get permission. You don't have to come to the county commission or the planning and zoning commission to get permission to do it.
And so when we did the analysis, or you did the analysis of the ordinances or lack of them in other counties, you discovered a fair number of counties that have no regulation and some that allow oil and gas development as a permissive use.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So how many counties have some kind of ordinance dealing with oil and gas?
3, not counting cities, okay? There are some cities that do have some regulations. You've got Rio Riva, Santa Fe, San
How
Miguel.
about nationwide?
No, we're only talking about New Mexico. But
So there's 3 that we reviewed. We did not review cities. Cities are urban. It's different. It's a whole different animal than what we're talking about.
yeah, and we, again, just to clarify for people, the county ordinance does not apply to incorporated towns or cities, right?
Absolutely.
They have their own planning and zoning if they want to have it.
Correct. A lot of the blue area are the incorporated municipalities, townships, town within the county.
Oh,
We have no jurisdiction within them.
really?
So I just want to emphasize to the commission again what Michael just said, which is one option for us would be to say, we just like it as it is. And we'll come back, I'll make sure that we come back to this. And plus, we could make it a permissive use in some or all of the districts, which would mean, as Michael said, that once somebody has a license from OCD, then they don't have to come to the county, they don't have to get any permission, they can simply drill their well. Okay, so that's the range. The one thing that would be difficult to do would be to simply eliminate any mention of oil and gas in the ordinance, because then, as Michael explained, that would fall under the category in number 14 on page 35, which is all uses not included herein. So they just, if we crossed it all off, it would simply be an affirmation of what's in the ordinance right now.
Right.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, ask a quick question. So I understand the first 4 here on the first page under the intent, it talks about some of the protections and you use the legalese to protect the county. I assume that there's something at the state level that provides some of these levels of protection in a more specific way?
There are.
Okay. Would you be able to-
OCD, for example, they permit this activity. From an activity point of view. So if you want to do oil and gas drilling in New Mexico, you have to go to OCD to get that permit to do that. Now, whether you have to get a permit from a county, from a land use point of view, that's totally different.
And as far as you know, the only thing that counties can regulate, well, they can the the thing that we're sure that they can regulate is land use, is that correct?
Correct. We're given that specific authority from the state as a state subdivision.
And can counties start with the state regulations or the state statutes and regulations and add to those?
They can.
Okay.
OCD, however, will not enforce. So if we write stringent rules, OCD has been very clear, they will not enforce those rules.
So they will enforce their rules, but not
Correct.
our rules. And so
Absolutely.
the county would have to enforce.
Correct.
Now,
Absolutely.
we'll take questions at the end.
Do we have an organization within the county that's capable? of
We do
doing this
not.
enforcement?
I have brought that to the county commission's attention, that if for some reason they wanted to get into the oil and gas business, they'd have to get an engineering firm, they'd have to, or start an engineering department or something like that to do that. It was the same thing with subdivisions and hydrology. That was the question brought before the county commission. Do you want to get into geohydrology? Do you want to get into water?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
So, any other questions about the current ordinance?
Well, I guess, for clarification, Michael, to me, it's basically the ordinance is giving some strength to the land use, you know, when you look at 13, specifically oil and gas, you know, that's basically the standard, but the ordinance basically is to kind of really get deeper into the county's responsibilities or what it would do to make sure that the county is involved in making sure that the health and safety of the public is
From a land use
from the land use perspective, yes.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, it gives guidance,
Yeah.
is what it does.
Right.
Industry, I don't care what industry you're in, you want guidance. You want to know what you have to do to open a business in Sandoval County. It gives guidance to the staff in what to ask for, what to make sure happens, what doesn't happen, and you'll see that everything within this draft is something our staff can enforce.
Exactly. So again, right now, what's here in land use is pretty brief, but again, this ordinance basically is the framework for the staff to work with
Correct.
in making sure that.
Correct. We spoke to this matter at the county commission at their economic development forum. It's surprising that not one of these wells is on private land.
Right.
They're all on jurisdiction outside of our jurisdiction. We believe, as staff, we believe that first, there's no guidance. Nobody knows what's going to happen to them when they come in. We all know what happened to Sandridge. We saw that. I don't think anybody would want to go through that. Even Sandridge pulled out after that mess. And so it just gives, it gives guidance to everybody on how to do business in Sandoval County from a land use perspective.
Correct.
Yes.
Again, this is your tool.
Yes, sir.
So one way of looking at it would be to number 13 in special uses, oil and gas exploration and production, and the structures and facilities associated with that use. That's all it says.
Correct.
You could think of this as the county's view, a dramatic expansion of that one sentence to make it clearer what we expect, what process you have to use, what standards you have to meet.
Correct.
So the effect, if the ordinance is passed by the Board of County Commissioners, then number 13 as a special use will disappear. It'll come off of this because there'll be more specific language somewhere else.
What it'll say, Mr. Chairman, under your, it'll be called out under special use, but then what it will do is direct you to Appendix B. What we'll call Appendix B.
So it'll still be a
Or
special
C,
use.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So, well, yeah.
Because
we'll
we
get
put
to
all the
this
technical
a few-
stuff in the
a few
back.
meetings
Right.
later.
Right. Oh, just for a procedural point of view, let me explain that too. You know how we were working through the reorganization of the zoning ordinance? We've gone ahead and pulled that back. We'd like to run that in tandem with this. Changing a zoning ordinance is quite a cumbersome process. It takes a couple months to do. You have plenty of notification you have to give. If we do plug this into the zoning ordinance, we'd like to just take it all as one package to the county commission.
All right.
Okay, so any questions? Yeah.
Just one more. So if I understood you correctly, Michael, if we add anything additional, we have no enforcement powers to do that beyond what you've recommended at this point. Would that be a true statement?
It would require county commission action in order to do that. What you have in your draft right now is something that my staff can handle right now and we can enforce. If you get into engineering, which county commission has not given us authority to do, that would be a decision they have to make.
Yeah, I guess that's my point. If we add anything to it and it's not enforceable, what's the point? If you don't have the enforcement ability.
Well, we're going to get into this down the road, but of course you can add language or change language having to do with land use parameters, land use issues, and that's perfectly fine. When we go through the ordinance, you may find something you don't like. You may find a setback. You want a different number. You may find something. That's perfectly fine. I need to strictly enforce jurisdictional matters with the state and the county because I was specifically told to write an ordinance that did not interrupt state's authority over this industry, and so we'll maintain that.
So just again, just so that everybody understands, we're making a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. They're the ones that are actually going to adopt potentially a new ordinance, okay? They will also have public hearings, and they can add or subtract language from our recommendations. So there's this is a long process. Yeah, I'll call in a minute. You're out of order.
That's all right.
You are out of order. Sit down.
All right.
No, we're not gonna listen. I'm going to call in a minute for questions. I don't want you to stand.
Put away.
Do not sit down, and I'll call you when it comes to your turn.
All right, thank you. My name is Susan Williams.
Okay, that's fine. I will call you if you have a question that's relevant to this issue. Okay. So if there's no other questions, then I'm going to open this up for questions from the public. But I'd like you to keep your questions to the current ordinance or the process that's currently in place. So if you have any questions about what's the issue right now, you're going to have to come up and sit in this chair and speak into the microphone because...
Mr. Chair, we did have Mr.
If the chair would like to run it the way we do, so we go through sections of this discussion, I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I just want to make sure if there's, because when we get an hour from now, people won't remember what their questions were.
Right. So if we're talking right now about procedural issues, things of that nature.
Current ordinance and procedural issues under the current ordinance. So come on up.
Sir, could I ask you if I'm a geologist and I'm also a retired regulatory specialist with the Corps of Engineers. And I don't know if technical expertise counts at this point?
We don't recognize expert witnesses, but we're more than happy to hear from you and anybody else.
Thank you so much. And I have neither nay or say on this. Whatever. But there are some issues that need to be addressed. I'm going to talk just for a minute about directional drilling, fracking, and the process.
Now wait.
But if you don't want me to talk about
to do this, I want you to, if you have any questions about the current ordinance, ask them. Otherwise, I'll give you a chance in public comment. You can talk about anything you want, but we're not talking about drilling now. We're talking about the current ordinance.
Well, I'd like to. Could I comment on just what was said here, or just to correct? Reinjection wells are not just water. Mm-hmm. They're a drilling fluid and effluent. They're not just water. So please keep that.
Point of order. We're talking right now about procedural matters. We're talking about the current ordinance. We're talking about issues that we just discussed. We need.
Well, I gave a very loose definition, and he's correcting it. That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, there were just different aspects of that. Maybe it's inappropriate for me to talk about. on that. I mean, there were different aspects of refining local laws when you're talking about state laws, when OCD and what they regulate, what the county can regulate, and what localities can regulate. You have much more jurisdiction to refine those and make them more appropriate to the areas that you govern. I mean, there's really no question to that. So I'd like to clarify that. Sir, I guess if I can't really talk about the technical issues, I should pass it on to somebody else, because there are certain aspects of this that I just want to comment on, and okay, so I misunderstood you.
I don't know why.
I misunderstood you. No, but what you said.
For extensive discussion of technical issues, it's just that this isn't the time. But, so.
I misunderstood what you said initially to begin with, and so I apologize about that. But I did want to, at least clarify the certain issues when it comes to regulatory aspect of it, as well as some of the comments that were made. So, if I can't, that's fine.
Sure. Come on.
What is the time then?
You have to speak. We're creating record. You got to speak into the microphone.
Okay, yes, I would like to do that. The issue is the ordinance, right?
Right, now the issue is the current ordinance, what we've got right now.
So, do you like it?
Do I like the current ordinance? Yes, I like the current ordinance. I wrote most of it.
Really? I'm a lawyer, and it's a piece of shit. It doesn't have any standards for safety and health and welfare of our people. So, hopefully you guys will say no to it.
Okay.
And redraft it. That's all I'm gonna say.
Fine. Okay, but to your question about when.
Yeah, do you have any questions for me?
The when is as I tried to explain before, we're gonna have a meeting every 2 weeks, so assuming that there's 6 months before we have to give this kind of commission, it means we could have as many as 12 meetings between now and then.
Yeah.
The first block of meetings are going to be devoted exclusively to understanding the current ordinance and the draft that's before us. Okay, just understanding, not commenting on whether we like it or dislike it. Just
have you read it?
Of course, I've read it.
How about you? All you guys?
Yes. Okay, so
it's
so
not
if
good.
you have a question, give us your question.
I'm a concerned citizen, and I'm a lawyer, and I am trying to help you guys.
Yes. Well, right now, if you have comments about, you've given a comment about the overall ordinance, but if you have specific questions about what the current ordinance says, ask the question and we'll try to get an answer for you.
Well, one place to start is the Santa Fe County ordinance. They're trying to deal with fracking. And the lawyer, Steve Sugarman, he's a good friend of mine, he did a good comment on it, detailed. If you want to look at it.
Sure.
Have you looked at it?
I have not looked at the Santa Fe
You
ordinance.
should look at it.
Okay.
Because we cannot adopt this ordinance here.
Yeah. Okay, so if you have a question, please ask the question.
I have no questions.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much. Let's see. We'll go down this side and then we'll do this side. Go ahead.
Commissioners, and my name is Randy Erickson. As I understand it, one of your charges is health and safety of the population here, health and safety of our residents. And I understand that this is, at least what Mike has said, is this is about land use. Okay, let's just talk about land use. Do you believe, my question is, do you believe that the current ordinance sufficiently provides for the health and safety of the residents of Sandoval County? Given that oil and gas is an extractive, it punches holes in the ground and can cause all kinds of, we know it's a hard industry. It's a hard industry to exist in. They've got challenges they're technical challenges, and sometimes things go wrong. I'm concerned about the health and safety of every living being in our county. And my question for you is, do you think that the current proposed ordinance actually provides for the health and safety of all human beings in our county?
obviously, what I'm trying to do is not working. So we'll continue this, but from now on, we're going to hold questions until the very end, because.
We have a procedural question.
Hi, my name is Denton Hall. I've been here before. I want to ask a question about this ordinance.
Sure.
I would like to make a statement in order to ask the question. The statement is, when we talk about the existing ordinance and we talk about the OCD, the state, our state having the regulations that are needed to go along with whatever our oil and gas turns out to be, there's an implicit assumption that the state has the proper regulations in place that will protect the people. That's an implicit assumption. And I would state that's not true. That's not true. And then I would state that right now there are papers written in the literature that show how you can go about defining new rules for different states, Colorado, South Dakota, other places, that actually give the municipalities and the counties the ability to protect their citizens. And that is what needs to be combined with what is going on here. You just can't start saying we're going to have this nice ordinance and assume that the state is protecting us, because it's not, for two reasons. It doesn't have the regulations that we need. It's not comprehensive at all. And number two is, it doesn't have the manpower in this state to even take care of the problems that we already have with oil and gas. We have 12 inspectors. There were 49,000 inspections before, and you expect the state to be able to cover this properly? No way. And I talked to Griswold.
I'm sorry, you're not asking a question. You're talking about.
I'm trying to make it clear to you.
We'll get to in a couple of meetings. I'm not going to take any more questions. We're going to move on, because this is clearly not working. So,
Could I make a suggestion to you all for clarification purposes?
sure.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, my name is Vicki Gottlieb, and there's been a lot of confusion here tonight, and among other people that I'm aware of, between the proposed oil and gas amendment to the comprehensive zoning ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where people are being lost. So if you could choose some language that makes it clear whether you're talking comprehensive and you're asking for comments on the comprehensive, which is what you're referring to as the existing, versus the proposed amendment to that comprehensive, which covers oil and gas.
So let us go over this again, because that's a very good question. Okay. The county commission has given us a task to complete. It is to amend the planning, make a proposal to them, a recommendation to them about an amendment to the planning and zoning ordinance. They have not asked for a comprehensive oil and gas ordinance, and they're not going to get one from us because they haven't told us to do that. For the last 5 meetings, I have said to people, if you think the county should adopt a comprehensive oil and gas ordinance, you need to go to the county commission and persuade them that they need to adopt a comprehensive oil and gas ordinance. If they then say to us, okay, we agree we need a comprehensive oil and gas ordinance, we'll be happy to write a comprehensive oil and gas ordinance. But that's not what they've asked us to do. And so I've repeatedly tried to say, we're going to do what the county commission has asked us to do, okay? They appoint us, we're responsible to them. They've asked a reasonable question, which is, please give us some recommendations about changing the county's planning and zoning ordinance. If, as I've said over and over again, if you don't think that's enough, don't come to us, go to them, because if they change what they're telling us, we'll be happy to do whatever they ask us to do. Now, the reason that we're starting with the current ordinance, which has one sentence in it about oil and gas, is because I want to make sure that everybody understands what's in place this very minute, okay? If anybody comes tomorrow and says, I've got a permit from OCD to drill a oil well in, let's say, west of Rio Rancho, the only thing that's in the ordinance right now is one sentence. It says it's supposed to be a special use, and then 4 very general standards. That's what's right now, okay? And so what I've been trying to do, but I'm going to give up, is to say if you have questions about what's in place right now, this is the time to ask them. We haven't even heard a presentation on what's in the draft, okay? So it's very premature to start talking about what's in the draft because we haven't even heard a presentation about it. The commission hasn't had a chance to ask any questions, clarify the language, okay? But if you have a question about what's in the ordinance at this very minute, now is the time to ask. But we don't want to hear comments about what's going to happen in the future or why this is inadequate. We haven't even talked about it yet. Okay, so go ahead.
Hello, my name is Tricia Douglas. I'm a resident, and my question is pretty basic.
Sure.
So I understand we have one sentence in the current ordinance,
Right.
and we're talking about amending that, but I also hear language saying we're making it more permissive to line up with the other counties. Okay.
You heard it wrong.
Okay, thank you.
What Mike is saying is, in the blue areas, okay, which are not under our control, somebody else regulates all the blue, okay? In the yellow areas, okay, the proposal is where there are very few people, okay, and that's the only private property in the county, okay? In those yellow areas where there's very low population, the effect would be, if this ordinance is adopted, would be to make it permissive. Somebody could go into an area, one of those yellow areas, once they had an OCD permit, could drill a well without further work with the county. Okay. Now, we haven't even talked about that yet. We may say, forget it, we don't want that, okay?
Okay.
In the red areas,
Right, where I
there would
live.
be a conditional use, which means somebody would have to come to us, lay out their plan, and this body would decide whether they can use the particular lot that they're going to put a well on, whether that's an appropriate place to drill, taking into account health and safety and all the other standards that we have here, okay? But as I said, it's too early to talk about what may happen because we haven't even told you what's in the ordinance.
Well, okay, so sorry, I heard the
Right,
permissive,
okay.
and I guess maybe what I would like is additional clarification.
You are going to get so much clarification, you will be tearing your hair out.
Okay. Because I guess
We're going to go through word by word,
Okay.
15 pages, and we're going to take testimony, and believe me, in 12 meetings from now, you will be ready to jump out the window with all the rest of us.
I doubt it, but.
Do you have a question?
I do, I have 2.
Okay, good. Okay, now we're never going to do this again, understand?
My name is Rosella Gonzalez. And my first question is a point of clarification I would like, because I agree with this woman. What I heard is that the staff's goal is to bring the state's most rigorous process, the 3-step process, Planning Commission, County Commission, and staff, more in line with the more lenient processes of other oil and gas production areas in the state. So there is, this woman, you didn't mishear, I guess is my question. And so my question is that the staff's goal, is to make the existing ordinance more lenient?
Do you want us to go into that, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, yeah, if you could answer that.
The draft that you have in front of you has two separate permitting processes within it. And yes, both of them are a step down from the way the current ordinance is. Current ordinance right now is a special use rezoning. If you even wanted to go out and do an exploratory well, you would have to come through the county and get a special use rezoning for that. You'd have to go through staff, through the planning commission, and up to the county commission to simply be able to do an exploratory well. Changing land use for a temporary use doesn't make sense. And of course, we're going to get into that when we get into the ordinance and the administration of that. But yes, it does.
Okay, so the goal is to make it more lenient rather than more rigorous, more scientific, more steady.
No, Mr. Chairman, may I explain that real quick?
Okay, yeah.
When the county first had a zoning ordinance, it was a performance ordinance. It said anything you do in the county, except for building a house or having a farm, has to go to the county commission for permission. Everything in the county. This was about 20 years ago. What we did as a county, at county staff, planning and zoning commission, and the county commission, was realign that ordinance. Because as I said, everything was going to the county commission. When I first started, I explained to the county commission, you will not be able to keep up with the workload if you think you can do everything. And that's exactly what they were doing, because nothing was happening. All that was going on were houses in Placitas were being built. And that's the truth. What we explained to them was to shift the authority for approvals down. So a lot of the authority that the county commission had, and they are the zoning authority for the county. The county commission is the zoning authority for the county. They pushed about 75% of all approvals down to this body. The county planning and zoning commission assumed that responsibility for approval. They further pushed down a lot of other approvals down to the staff. That's exactly what's happening here. There's a proposal from staff to realign the approval process, not to make it easier, just to streamline the process. You have an administrative process. The rules are spelled out. The rules are spelled out. So everybody knows what the rules are. That's why this is an important process. That's why it is important for the public, and I believe industry, to get involved in this process. Because who approves what is less important than what the rules are. If the staff...
We'll clear the room. We observe basic courtesy here. We don't shout out. We don't talk when someone else is talking. Okay? We've enforced that rule. We enforced it with Sandridge. It's been the rule here since I've been involved in 1988. Okay? So we listen carefully. We listen to you. You listen to the staff. We listen to you. You listen to us. Okay?
The important check and balance within that framework of permitting is the appeal process. If the public believes that the staff did something wrong, they can appeal to you. If they think that what you did is wrong, they can appeal to the county commission. This process is a better process, we believe, because of the appeal process. But within that appeal process, rather than just saying, I don't like what the staff did, I don't like what the Planning and Zoning Commission did, they have to enumerate first that they have standing, that they're being harmed in some way, and then they have to explain how the mess up occurred. How did you do wrong? It focuses the argument for the county commission. It explains that somehow staff didn't follow the rules, the planning commission didn't follow the rules, and so what they do is they decide, you messed up, go back, do it again. There's a safety check in the zoning ordinance, and it's the appeal process. From our point of view, from staff's point of view, the approval, where the approval is done is less important than the rules that have to be followed.
My second question is, where in the process could I raise my concern about integrating the effects of the ordinance on other areas that should be of concern to planning and zoning, such as air quality, general population health, public health, other issues that affect our healthcare insurance premiums, our healthcare insurance needs, the providers that we should be trying to bring in, all those things. Where would I address that? And I'm sure other people have other concerns that aren't just healthcare. That just happens to be my area. Where would we address this? When do we get an opportunity?
Okay. Well, so as I tried to explain, we're going to have meetings where we go into great detail about what this proposed ordinance, at least what the drafters of this proposed ordinance had in mind, and make sure, one, that what they had in mind is actually written down there, okay? And so we'll give them an opportunity to explain literally, word by word. What did you mean? Does what you wrote actually convey the meaning that you want it to convey? When we're done with that, then we'll open it up for people to say, I don't like it, add this, take this out, make it tougher, and we'll consider all those, and at some point we'll then sit down and say, do we want to make changes? Do we want to add something? Do we want to take it away?
Mr. Chairman.
And that'll happen before we make a recommendation to the county commission.
May I add clarification to that also, Mr. Chairman? I just spoke to a citizen today about that. The oil and gas industry is a big, complex issue. There's all kinds of issues related to it. Air quality, water quality, those types of things. Those are handled typically by engineers. Those are not handled by land use planners. The discussion of those types of issues being handled by the county or dealt with by the county, that discussion needs to happen at the county commission.
So it's possible that your recommendation would be to bring in a consortium of engineers to answer our question?
No, I'm trying to clarify that. That was a discussion that I had with the county commission. That's why we have been charged with dealing with that portion of the oil and gas industry that deals with land use. It's an important component. It's something that's not covered by the state or the feds. It's something that's left to the local government. How far away do these things have to be? How is the lighting? Who handles the fire protection? How do the roads work? The feds don't do that. The state doesn't do that. That's our job here.
Okay, you've allowed me my questions. The only comment would be that I don't care how much lighting there is if you're poisoning my children.
Okay. We're going to stop there. So, Peter, if you're going to explain the ordinance, why don't you start now?